You are listening to Spilling the Tea, a real estate podcast with Kristy Macero and Shelagh Maycheck.
Hello everyone and welcome to season 2 of Spilling the Tea. We are your hosts, Kristy Macero and Shelagh Maycheck.
Hello.
Today we have with us reoccurring guest realtor Garry Voigt and one of the top mortgage brokers in Western Canada, Deryk Williamson from Thrive Mortgage Co. Before we go any further, where did you guys meet and how long have you known each other?
Oh, I didn't know there was quizzing questions.
Didn't do the homework.
Well, we met in grade 8.
Yeah, but we didn't go to the same high school.
No.
It was through friends of friends.
Yeah.
Grade 8, so we were probably 14 years old, so almost 20 years.
I just picture you guys at a party and everyone's really, really short. They're like 5 feet, but you guys are like 6 feet. So
All
you
of
guys
our
probably,
friends were tall.
You
It
probably
was
had
strange.
conversations at other people and you're like, you're tall. Do you want to be my friend?
Yeah,
Deryk
we wore
was
cowboy
always,
boots.
Yeah, Deryk was always a good
Regular jeans.
6 to 8 inches taller than everybody else, though.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Thank you guys for coming. I appreciate it because today's podcast is all about financing and how if you are not careful, you can really upset the bank and lenders prior to closing. It can be a very delicate balance if buyers do not understand the mechanics behind what makes them a candidate for the bank to lend to. Ultimately, banks need to know one's financial picture in order to lend them money. But before we get into that, we're going to turn to Shelagh the way we always do for every podcast. Shelagh, have you ever had to make some serious considerations when it comes to financing in order to obtain a mortgage?
Holy. Yeah, actually. During my first house, this was right when I had switched jobs. I had come from working for the government to working for you, and I was an independent contractor, and I was switching over from being an employee to an independent contractor, but we were also thinking about downsizing from our house. So we had just kind of started playing with the idea, and then we realized the mortgage company, once I switched over to independent contractor, they want more history of your payment history. And they're like, well, you have to be in that job for generally about 2 years and show a steady income for us to consider that for your mortgage. So suddenly I'm going, well, my timeline just moved up a whole bunch because it's either I move now or I'm going to have to wait 2 years.
It's a good thing your employer was very understanding.
Yeah.
And continued to pay you as an employee.
Yeah, until such a time as I could move.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that was one curveball for sure.
Yeah. And then the other time we were upsizing. We went from a townhouse to a house, but this time we had purchased a car recently. So we had car payments and we were selling our townhouse, moving into a house. And the bank was like, sure, we'll loan you the money, but you have to pay off your car in between. So either pay out the loan or get rid of it. So we were thinking about, we'll just use the proceeds from sale to pay off the car and keep it. And then we were looking at the numbers a bit more, and it made way more sense to pay the car off, sell it, and then use those funds towards the house because the market was going up every single week. And we're like, wow, we could really use that extra $30,000 to try to compete on getting a house. So we had to, sacrifice the nice new car that we had and wanted so that we could get into something and live in it.
Yeah, so just basic financial responsibility because your buying power went up as well, which was super cool. Yeah. And then you ended up achieving all of your goal, which is the point.
You bet.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I once did a deal during a very fast market, and we ended up writing on a place that my clients really wanted, and it went into multiples, and it was one of those crazy, like, you have to decide right now how much over ask are you doing, and it was they were pre-approved, as they always are. I always make sure my clients get fully pre-approved, and I remember exactly where I was standing when this happened. It's funny when bad things happen in your house, sometimes you remember exactly where you were. I got a phone call in the kitchen, and I remember calling my clients being like, congratulations, guys, you ended up getting it. And they're like, oh, that's so great. And like, we submitted a subject-free offer with a deposit check. So it's done. Like, it's done.
Done deal.
Yeah. We didn't even need any, like, final signatures or anything.
That was back before the rescission period.
Back before rescission period, so
back
there's
when
no...
a subject-free offer was a subject-free offer.
actual subject,
Yes.
the good old days.
No takesies backsies.
No takesies back. You can't change your mind.
Yeah.
And I hung up with the agent after being like, thank you so much for choosing me. You chose the right people, blah, blah, blah. Hung up the phone, and then the mortgage broker calls me and goes, oh my God. And I'm like, what? And he's like, there was there was property in another country that wasn't disclosed when we were doing the application, and this could have, you know, an effect on their pre-approval, especially if that's where the money's coming from. And I was like, what?
Oh.
Like, what? Like, what are we talking about?
This call was right after your call.
It was literally, I swear to you,
Talk
it was
about
like,
bad timing.
it was like 24 seconds later. Like, it was so fast. And
Wow.
yeah, so I just come off of that, and I'm like, so there's this moment where I'm like, what do I do? Like, I can't call back that realtor and say, oh, just kidding, go to the next guy. Or can I? Like, I don't know. So
Yeah.
like, is it good that it was so fast so that I could get out of it if we really had to? But if our offer was so much higher, if it was, say it was, then we're kind of trapped, right? And then I had to call my clients and be like, I need you to get in touch with your mortgage broker.
Oh.
It has come to light that, you know, we need to make sure that your deal gets across the finish line. And it did. So we got very lucky, but I'll never forget that feeling of having...
Everything's good. All the ducks are in a row.
Oh.
We got it.
Yeah, just kidding. Like, it was crazy. So I don't ever want to go through that again. It was a terrible feeling, and the moment, wasn't great.
Pesky assets in other countries.
Totally.
Yeah.
Garry, we're going to go to you first. Have you ever had a client not quite inform the mortgage broker of everything in their financial picture, a little skeleton in the closet action?
Not typically, because usually, obviously, as realtors, we don't take buyers out shopping before they're pre-approved. And we luckily get to work with great mortgage partners like our friend Deryk over here at Thrive and other great mortgage partners as well. And we usually get in touch with the mortgage broker prior to submitting the offer just to confirm that everything's, the T's are crossed and the I's are dotted. So generally, there's not a huge concern usually. The only concern that I usually find is when the buyer's hesitant to kind of supply you who they're working with, their mortgage partners.
I've got a guy.
Yeah. And of course there are those times where you have either a seasoned buyer or perhaps an older demographic seller that is well in touch with their financial situation, that they say they're fully pre-approved and they're working with so and so, and you do take them for face value on that sometimes. And luckily it hasn't came back to bite me yet, because I'm a pretty good judge of character on that. But there hasn't been specifically on the financing side a skeleton in the closet last second, luckily, because again, we work with great people usually, and we refer our clients to great people, and we usually have a pretty good vetting process before we're out there making offers.
Yeah, because I find that, like, it's so much easier when we get to talk to the mortgage broker.
100%.
If we know that they're working with Deryk, and we can call and check in on Deryk. Deryk's a professional. He's not going to tell us anything in that person's portfolio that we do not need to know. Like, the confidentiality is there. But it's also nice to hear out of the mortgage broker's mouth that everything's good to go.
Yeah. Or, hey, I've been asking them 3 times for the pay stub that I need for the final little stamp of approval. And we're like, okay.
Yeah. Or, oh, hey, I learned that this money's coming from this location and it needs blank. So I agree with you. Pre-screening super important, because if there is a skeleton in the closet, you're going to find out probably at the worst time. Have you ever, and please understand as an audience, I'm asking Garry questions. He's been how long have you been a realtor for? 8 years, 9 years?
Maybe 9 years.
Okay. So we're going all the way back to day one.
Yeah.
So you can feel free to answer this, because, it's a long career. Have you ever had to make the dreaded, my client could not get financing call to another realtor?
I think back at that, and to be honest, maybe one time or two out of hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of transactions. Maybe one, maybe two max.
Right. And it's a pretty bad phone call.
It's a horrible phone call to make. And I am on the selling side a lot, and that is my biggest pet peeve. And in fact, it's come to the point where I almost get to the point of vetting the buyer when I'm working on the seller side, because it's so frustrating. There's so many realtors out there that do not talk to their buyer about financing prior to making offers. It is mind-blowing. So personally, I want to keep a good reputation with the other realtors in our industry. So I typically don't make the offer without knowing that it's got a 99.9% chance of going through.
Yeah, I think this is a lot of who you know. Like, if people know that Thrive is on the other end of the deal, for example, they'll know that they know their process, that it's a great company and they're going to vet them first and that they've given that stamp of approval. So it's nice to work with brokers that support you when you're writing, because that way you've got more legitimacy when you come to the table. Like, I know if I'm bringing a buyer to you, you know that my guys are pre-approved.
For sure. If it's between your offer and somebody else's offer that I don't know, and you got a pre-approval letter from Thrive because they send it to all their pre-approved clients, and you can provide that, just basically stating that they've gone through the pre-approval process. And even if I've got 5 other offers and none of them have supplied a pre-approval letter, I'm going right to your offer. That's the first offer I'm going to, and seeing what we can do with that offer.
Yeah.
What if it wasn't a Thrive or like a well-known broker or bank? How do you vet them? Like you mentioned, you kind of dig in.
Well, we all know that a lot of banks don't send pre-approval letters for one, so
They
we have
go,
to,
what's that?
We have to take that into consideration.
Just
that,
typed up on the realtor's letterhead.
yeah,
Like,
yeah,
from email,
oh yeah,
like, or whatever.
like we got to take that into consideration that they may be pre-approved but they don't have a letter. But you can usually gauge from the realtor, like, hey, are they pre-approved, by what they say after that.
They'll say
They're
like
They're
one's
good to go. Don't worry.
so.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I'm worried. Right away. I'm worried.
They're good to go. They have money. Like, no, they don't. No, they don't. Is that what they said?
Yeah.
Like,
So even if it's not from Thrive, if it's from anybody,
yeah.
The little amount of pre-approval letters that I see, I'm going right to that offer. If they have a pre-approval letter, I'm going right to that offer to see what they can do, even if they're not the highest offer, to see if they can get up there to compete, because we want to work with that offer because we know they've been pre-approved, which is more than what most people do with their clients.
I
right?
clicked online.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
60-second pre-approval.
You
Yeah,
bet.
right?
You
Yeah.
bet.
Yeah. So and that's what makes us so great, because if we have we do have a large portion of our audience that are realtors that listen, because they pick up little tidbits here and there. And our advice there is, like, make sure you're working with a reputable mortgage company wherever you can with your buyers. Like, get in with the companies that send those pre-approval letters. Call Thrive. Like, make sure that your clients have good financial backing behind them, because the last thing you'd want to do is make that phone call like Garry hates getting, where, oh no, my client couldn't
And
get
I get
financing.
far too often.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I don't get, when I do get that call, and I don't get them very often, because I'm like you, I'll call and say, oh, your client's pre-approved. Yeah. Have you seen the letter? Have you talked to their mortgage broker? Do you know if
Have they pulled your credit?
yeah, little like things like that, right? Have you put in your job letter, that kind of thing?
The
Because-
challenge is,
No.
is when, because you were just talking about that, is when you have 5 offers and there's no pre-approval letter
Yes.
with any of them.
Then
and
you start-
nobody's said they're
Yeah.
actually been fully pre-approved. That's when
Yeah.
the challenge comes in.
We make sure that agents know upfront, and I think if realtors are listening, do it so that when you say, yeah, my client's been pre-approved, because if you have to turn around and make that phone call and say, oh no, actually they couldn't get financing, like, I lose my shit.
And
when
the
that
call
happens.
always seems to be on subject removal day
Oh.
at 6:00.
Yeah, or
Just
can I
last
get an
minute.
extension? There's
Like we
more.
didn't know there was an issue before.
Oh,
Yeah.
it's
Would
crazy.
you, correct me if I'm wrong here, but I would assume if someone just wants to back out, maybe they found another property or they're just getting cold feet, most people would probably fall back on financing to back out.
They could.
Or are there other ways that would be more?
There's a
Depends on the
Proper.
contract.
Yeah, there's a rescind now. So
Yeah, true.
But you
Yeah.
also have to pay that amount if you use the rescindal as your
Yeah.
way out. Financing is probably the easiest one to fall back
Because you're
on.
never going to be able to.
You got to be
Tell
careful
us
with that, though. So
Yeah.
if you rescind and then you go right on another agent's property, but they know each other, it's like, oh, it's the same product. Oh, is it so and so?
Then you're just getting a
Their
bad
clients
name in
aren't
the community,
pre-approved.
right?
which
Yeah.
they're not allowed to discuss
Yeah.
for the record.
Or your own listing. They touch base, you going, is this available?
Oh yeah, if you've got
Yeah.
more than one product.
Which has happened
Yeah.
to all of us. Yeah.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
like, you just pulled out on my other deal. Like,
Oh,
you're
it's
still
different
shopping with
clients,
them?
different clients, same price point, same product.
Yeah, same
Same
names.
name on the
Same
contract.
name.
Yeah.
Just abbreviated, like
Yeah.
yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
there is though is that risk though, because, well, I guess you got to everybody, all the mortgage brokers have to keep it confidential, but
Yes.
a realtor could challenge and be like, okay, prove
Prove
to me
it.
that you've done everything that you can to get that financing in place. Nobody's ever done it, but that's because you hate seeing that, right? Where people
Yeah.
just
Show
direct
me
it
where
from
they
another
declined
property.
you.
Yeah, show me where they declined you, and
Yeah.
it could be
Yeah.
anything.
So
Yeah.
there is, always keep that in mind.
Deryk, as a mortgage broker, do you often find that your clients don't always tell you everything up front?
I think the short answer is yes. Like, people definitely leave information to the side, but you almost can't blame them. like, I think a lot of people expect a lot of a client or a consumer or borrower when, like, most people don't have a clue what they need to provide when it comes to a mortgage application or what income they can or can't use. Like, the amount of applications that we see and someone says they're an employee of a company, but they own the company, right? But in their mind, they're like, well, I'm paid as a T4 employee. Like, I'm an employee, right? So that's just, like, they haven't had the education to know what to submit.
Right.
Or people submit an application and it says they have 3 kids, but they haven't included their CCB income. Again, they're probably thinking, like, why the hell would I use my CCB income for my mortgage application? It's for my kids, right? So, yes, there are people that try to get around things and hide things. I would honestly say we don't see a whole lot of that.
Good.
But we've built a process to uncover everything, and I would put way more weight on the mortgage broker trying to uncover these things. If it gets through to a point where a deal is falling apart on subjects because of something that was missed, I would actually put that on the broker for the most part.
Right.
Right? Like, we have to figure out, is there credit issues? Like, if you pull a credit bureau and the client has a car loan and it doesn't show up, if we don't tell them that it's not on the credit bureau and they aren't telling, like, how would they possibly know? Right?
Yeah.
So we built a process where we get all the documentation, obviously, as you should, but we actually outline everything in an email: income, credit, assets, everything. And we do a 45-minute call to go through everything and make sure it's correct. And that gives them the opportunity to come to us and say, actually, I do have a car loan that's not on my credit bureau. Right? So I think I would put way more weight on the broker when these situations come up, in my opinion.
So you don't get any situations where, like, you've got, a new couple that are sitting down to buy a house and, like, you find out that he's got
signed on my ex-girlfriend's SUV.
Yeah. Or, I kept accepting those game things on World of Warcraft and now I have $40,000 in debt. Or
you're way worse than that.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, because I'm sure you see everything. But are there any surprises at the table? Like, do people kind of...
Definitely. Like, that's definitely something that comes up. People don't want to admit, especially when someone has credit challenges or debt. Like, that's not something that people are typically openly wanting to talk about, especially with maybe a new spouse. So that stuff comes up, but we tell them from day one, like, everything that you're giving us is disclosed to all parties. So you might as well tell us now. Because you're right. Like, when we send that email that shows the credit, if it's coming up at that point, they're probably not going to buy a house together, right?
Hey,
so
sweetie,
we give them
what's
the
student
opportunity
loan?
to talk about it before we get to that stage.
That's good.
Yeah.
It's like a heads up, courtesy heads up. We're going to talk about it.
Yeah.
You may want to talk about it together first.
Yeah. In our next meeting, we're going to uncover everything.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that's fair. So in the situation that I was telling you about earlier, where there was that property in another country, the buyer just didn't know that would have counted. Like, they didn't understand the process. So again, it's more about education and not knowing what was going to count in Canada, for example.
For sure. And a lot of times unfortunately, people aren't looking at the documentation properly. Like, if someone has a property in a different country and they're claiming rental income here, it would typically show up on their tax return, right? And, like, our application has a box that you check if you own property in other countries or have debt in other countries. So, like, you give them every opportunity to tell you, but it's also on the broker to look. And at the end of the day, there are things that get missed. And a lot of times these applications go through and they would never come up, right? So I don't know how that came up, but it was probably either something was missed in the process, or it was, like, money coming in for their down payment or something of that nature.
Yeah. I don't know. Like, so again, professionals, like, it wasn't entirely disclosed because it's not really my business. I just need to know if the deal's going to go together or not. But that was like the loose general kind of feel that I was getting.
Yeah.
I mean, yeah, I swear time stood still as I was
When
sitting
the
there.
broker calls you in a panic, you're like, okay, I'm panicked.
Well, we can make it go together.
And that's
'cause-
what people might not know is, like, us as realtors, we don't diverge into any of the financial side of it. It's like we refer it, and whatever is going on in your finances is between you and, like, the broker. Just let us know once you've been pre-approved. Like, that's what people don't understand. They're afraid to tell us stuff. It's like, we don't need to know anything. Talk to the mortgage broker. They'll take care of all the
Don't tell us anything.
Just let us know once you've been pre-approved.
Well, I think we stay in our own lane.
Totally.
Right? Because we can't, like, we're not home inspectors, we're not mortgage brokers, we're not accountants, we're not, like, insurance brokers. Like, we try to make sure we stay in our own lane. So,
and that's how it should be. I mean, just on that confidentiality piece, like, we actually have a consent form that allows us to speak to real estate agents about
neat.
clients' information, because I've always thought that that's not really fair to the agent. That if I have to call you and say, this is not working, but I can't tell you why.
Right.
Like, you should know why, in my opinion, right? Like, you're so involved in the deal. Not that you're going to action anything or communicate that to the client.
Right.
And we're very vague on what we will explain. Like, we won't go into, detail on debts or bad credit or whatnot. But for me to tell you,
if
I have to tell you we're going from an A lender to a B lender and not tell you why, like, I'd probably be like, what the fuck are you talking about? If I was a realtor, right? And then we need another week because B lenders are slow. You're going to be like, what? How?
Yeah.
Oh yeah.
that makes sense
If
for
someone
sure.
says they need an extension, I'm like,
That's when
No.
you
I wanna be able to
dive
tell
in
you
a little bit, right?
yeah, it's like,
Why?
yeah, I
Tell
need
me
to,
more.
Well, because we have to explain to the other party a lot of the times, and if we can't explain it, and that's what I love about working with you guys, because if I need you to talk to the other realtor in maybe terms that
Yeah.
I can't quite explain, then that's when it's
Definitely.
nice to have people jump in, especially. So we always have 3 golden rules for our clients when it comes to closing. The first one is to make sure that they have insurance on their property, okay? Because banks need insurance in order to close because it's their asset. So who checks for that? Is it the lawyer?
The
'Cause
lawyer
does
sets it up and they have to send it to the bank before funding.
Okay. Okay,
The
so
bank has to receive it.
Okay, so very important to do before completion, which is
Yeah.
why we always tell everyone make sure that you get it done. It's part of our reminders. We also tell people we get a lot of first responder families that like to transfer out and they love to quit their jobs prior to moving.
Oh, yeah.
Because they're
Big
like,
time.
oh, we're out of this community. Peace, quit their job because they hate it. And then it's like, well, you needed your job in order to
Yeah.
qualify
Yeah.
for your
You
financing.
weren't moving for another 6 months. Come
Yeah,
on.
but they just get in, we call it like transfer mode.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that's it, they've checked out. And they don't want to, they know that they're on the way out, so they want to quit their job right away. But like, we need your income, so don't quit your job.
Yeah.
And the third thing is, of course, not to buy anything because
Oh.
it's so exciting when you're going to buy that new home and there's furniture that you want to furnish for, new vehicle because maybe your family's growing or things like that. But unfortunately, that can also come with, you know, like the money that we need for the house. Like you
Yeah.
can't put things on credit.
Yep.
So it's,
I had a girlfriend. I wasn't representing her because she was buying a place in a different area in BC. So I referred her to another agent there, and she ended up buying a place. She hadn't moved in yet, and she called me going, I'm looking at this SUV. I think we're going to go pick it up tomorrow. And I'm going, wait a second, you just bought a place. And she's like, yeah. I'm like, you can't buy a car tomorrow. I'm like, did you talk to your broker first? She's like, what do you mean? I'm like, talk to your mortgage broker first, because like, where's the money coming in? She's like, oh, I was going to buy it cash, so it shouldn't be a problem. And I'm like, but are those your completion funds? She's like, well, yes, but we get another paycheck right after, so it shouldn't matter. I'm like, the timing of this is too close.
it's too tight.
Don't
Yeah.
get the car and risk losing the house. Like, just wait.
People
put a
like to
deposit
live on
on
the
it.
edge, eh?
Yeah.
I wouldn't be touching that.
Well,
Why stress about that?
not everyone gets told
Nice
to
car,
like
probably.
don't make
Yeah.
a big purchase. So they go, okay, I got the house, I've got to move, I need to book a trailer and tow it. Might as well have the larger SUV for that. It makes sense in their mind, and they haven't been told not to.
Yeah, because they're planning for their life.
Yeah.
For
Right.
sure.
Yeah.
And it's such an exciting time too,
Yeah,
right? When you're buying a
totally.
house, the amount of people that finance furniture, right? Like brick cards and whatnot. It happens all the time.
Yeah.
We had a guy
Good point,
day
yeah.
before closing, it was an insured purchase, so like less than 20% down, so you don't really have backup options.
Yeah.
And for whatever reason, like this never happens. The insurer, which was Genworth, which is now Sagen, they pulled credit the day before closing. This guy financed a $60,000 truck.
Oh my
Truck. $60,000. And this is the day before closing, and it threw his ratios completely out of whack. So he actually scrambled and borrowed money from like every friend that he had, his parents, his aunts, his uncles, to pay this truck off that day. Because he was going to lose it.
That's wild.
Okay, that was my next question for you because I
Sorry.
was wondering how well this is good. Like
Yeah.
it's a natural flow. So how often do you come across people who are in these situations where they change their employment or they make those kinds of purchases?
You know what? Honestly, earlier in my career, like you learn as you go, right?
Right.
We made a ton of mistakes, and I'm happy to talk about those because we've learned from it. We've built processes around that. But earlier, when we didn't communicate as well, way more issues, right? And that was just simply on us because we didn't tell people. And again, how the hell would people know if we don't tell them?
Right.
But you know, the last 5-6 years, very, very rare. Like maybe 1 out of 20, 1 out of 30. But what we always tell people is if you need to do something, because sometimes it's life, right? Like your car broke.
Yeah.
They need to go to Vancouver every day. They're not going to take the bus. Like I need to go finance a vehicle. So we just tell people to talk to us, let us know. And like a lot of times we can say, okay, you can actually afford a $400 payment, but like not a $700 payment. So
Right.
go lease a vehicle for $400, right? Or if you're going to switch jobs, like tell us before. A lot of times
Yeah.
you can switch jobs, but you can't have probation. It's got to be guaranteed. Like it can't be commissioned. So as long as we can review everything before they make a decision, it often will work out, or they just don't do it. Right.
Right.
So that's a big piece, is like just tell us everything that's going to change in your life before closing, and we'll let you know if it works or not. And
Yeah.
people are actually really good with that.
That's a good
they
point
will
because
call
people
us.
don't always plan for everything that comes up, and
Oh,
like cars
totally.
break down.
Yeah.
Yeah, life
And if you don't
happens.
have cash sitting around, you're financing a vehicle, right?
Yeah.
So on that note, during COVID, people were losing their jobs and people were getting laid off, and that was all happening smack in the middle, I'm sure, of people who had purchased and they're about to close. And I know that some people were getting their jobs checked because it was kind of a
Changing market. Yeah.
wild situation. Did that affect a lot of contracts that you saw? Like, did you have people that lost their
That was a
jobs
crazy time, actually. What we did see, which I didn't expect to see, most of the bigger institutions which do the bulk of the business, they actually came out and honored those contracts. And they just weren't going to check the employment because this is where, like, there's good and bad with banks, obviously, but a lot of them try to take the right approach when, even with, like, if people are missing their mortgage payments, they don't want to go into foreclosure. Like, they'll do everything in their power to stop it because they don't want to be on the news as, like, Scotiabank foreclosing on a 70-year-old lady. Like, it's a bad look, even though it's her
It is.
fault.
It's
that is
not
a bad
the best
Or
look.
mad.
yeah.
Thank
But they will
goodness.
literally do everything they can to try to help that person to keep the mortgage going or help them get it paid out. Like, they'll find a broker or whatever. So to that point, a lot of them made concessions and just said, like, we're not going to check our existing contracts and we're not going to cancel existing approvals.
Please go get a new job.
Unless they were
Yeah.
notified of something.
Yeah.
But all the people that were pre-approved were hooped, right? Like, you had to just cancel them.
Yeah.
Right.
Pre-approvals were canceled right away.
Okay, so it was like they were grandfathered in, for lack of a better
If it was
term.
like an actual approval with a contract or like a refinance, like a true approval, they would honor those and fund them. But like any pre-approval, they're going to re-review everything once it goes live, like an accepted offer again.
Right.
So there's no way that you would have got through that.
Yeah.
Okay, interesting. Gary, have you ever faced any of those situations where a client quit or bought something that put them at the risk of not qualifying for their financing?
No, like during the process or
Yeah, like basically they remove subjects and then you find out
yeah.
that they're gonna buy something or
They're on Instagram on a new
No.
sled.
I I can't think of really anything that in that sense that has happened. Generally everybody's pretty good with that. Again, if they're getting good advice from their broker, then usually it prevents that, and if they've
Right.
got the systems in place and ask the right questions, and usually it prevents that. What I have had is the deposit. When you're going to firm up a purchase, when you're removing subjects, and that deposit, and similar to Deryk, earlier on in my career, you have to advise the client about it because again, they have no idea. So where we had some troubles early on was, they're going to remove subjects, and then you say, okay, where's the deposit? And they go, well, it's at my funds are from the sale of the house.
Yeah.
And it's like,
Yeah.
oh, well, we need this much right now. They're like, well, I don't have that much right now.
Yeah.
So that happened once. Rest assured, it didn't happen again after that.
Yeah.
And that was a huge scramble. Luckily, the bank manager drove to the bank that evening and cut them a check. Like, it was crazy.
Wow.
I don't even know how, but anyway, it
You got a
worked
pretty
out.
stress-free business, eh? Not many issues.
Well, when you get the systems in place like you guys, like you try to
Yeah.
mitigate these issues. When one happens, then you put a system in place so it doesn't happen again.
Yeah.
So we also have had some hiccups with when people are using their RSPs, taking money out from RSPs
Yes.
for
That's
their
a
deposit,
huge
and
one.
Banking
they
at
don't-
Tangerine.
and
There's-
banking at Tangerine,
it
and they're
doesn't
mailing
exist.
you,
What is
and they're
that?
mailing you a deposit check
Yeah.
that takes like 6
From
days.
Ontario.
You know,
Like, can I
so-
track it?
Yeah.
Is
So,
it coming?
Yeah, so we have had some hiccups with that deposit earlier on in my career, and RSP's one, Tangerine
Tangerine.
Bank another. What's another one where deposits usually sometimes get hiccuped?
Any online bank, like Equitable, all
Online
that kind of
bank.
stuff.
Right.
Yeah, they go to the bank and they won't give them a bank draft that day.
That's
and
a
it's all
good point on the
subject
deposits. Like, I don't know what it is, but for the longest time, it's almost like the realtors assumed the broker was doing it. The
Yes.
broker
Yeah.
assumed
Totally.
the realtors
I've
having
talked
the
to you
conversation.
about
You
that
did it, right?
before.
No, you.
But the
Yeah.
more you think about it, like it really should be a broker thing because they're looking at the assets and looking at the money, and
Right.
like you can pinpoint and say, okay, like you don't actually have any cash.
Totally.
Yeah.
This is
Yeah.
You
an
would
issue,
think, right?
Yeah.
But I don't know
Yeah.
why. For the longest time, it was always the assumption like, oh, the realtors probably had this conversation that
Yeah.
they need a deposit, right?
Well, sometimes you'll get sellers who maybe they sold in another area and they're coming to buy, and you talk to them about needing a deposit. And they're like, well, what do you mean? Like, I'll get it when the house sells. And we're like, but you need to purchase the house now to have something to move into. And they go, well, I don't have that money on me.
Or
Like,
we
they
have-
don't have cash.
We have people that come out from different parts of the country because they
Yeah.
transfer in, and a deposit in some small towns are like
I
$500.
was just gonna
Yeah.
say, in Kitimat Terrace, like you put them on a credit card, $1,000.
Yeah. I'm like,
Down here, it's a little
a
different.
little bit more.
Yeah.
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 So I know that we've talked about that before because I was always wondering, like, do you guys talk about it or we talk about it? But I want to know where that money's coming from ultimately. ultimately. Like when it's a deposit, I always say, is it coming from your RSPs? Do you need to free that up right now? Because if someone wants to go out and buy tomorrow, the last thing you're going to want to say is, oh, actually you can't, because your money needs to get freed up from your RSPs and blah, blah, blah.
You warned us about that when we bought our first house, and you were right. We went to go withdraw, and they're like, it takes 3 business days.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And deposit loans are expensive. Like if you're having that conversation last minute, they cost thousands of dollars typically.
Ooh.
And then last question of the night goes to Garry, just on that topic of insurance, because sometimes you buy and sell in a Soyuz. Your family spends a lot of time there.
Done a lot of deals in the interior.
Yeah. So did you ever have a client not be able to close due to wildfire?
Luckily, I haven't. I know a lot of colleagues that have had. I believe you've had that before too. And luckily, when COVID was going down, they compiled a clause for the contracts, because we were also having issues with getting into the lawyer's office for signings. And it was the force majeure clause. Yeah. And basically it was like, if one of these events happens, the completion date's going to get automatically extended. And, that's the same with COVID and the wildfires and stuff like that. Mm-hmm. So we started implementing those in all of the contracts that we were doing in places that were higher risk. Yeah. And even just generally in contracts down here, because if somebody was isolated for 2 weeks and they had to complete, well, we got a problem. Right.
Mm-hmm.
So
they hadn't passed like the legislation to allow for virtual signing at that point. So because everything had to be done in person. And it's kind of funny because down here you don't think, oh, wildfire, not a big deal. Well, we had a house out in Harrison Mills last year, and the realtor called me. He was like, Kristy, got a problem with completion. I'm like, sounds like you have a problem with completion. Cause like,
that does sound like something you would say.
I was like, he's like, we have a problem. And I'm like, well, this realtor, he wasn't very honest. And so he's like, Kristy, we got a problem. I'm like, a problem for who? Like, tell me, because a problem can be subjective. Like, what's up? Yeah. And he goes, there's a wildfire within 50 kilometers of Harrison Mills. And like, there's no fire around them. Like, it's not even close, but the insurance company wouldn't give it. So I informed him of how to get insurance. There's a backdoor portal through TD that you can go on and sign up for, and then the deal closed, no problem. Yeah. But it was just one of those situations where he was in his head, longtime realtor, he just didn't know about that one little thing. Mm-hmm. And he was saying like, we're not going to be able to close, but we did.
Here's the link.
Yeah, I literally sent him the link and said,
well, you guys must have had a ton of examples where
we had tons, but thankfully everyone had that subject or that clause in the contract. I was always curious about, like, you can put that in this contract, but it's typically a lot of times a buy and a sell. Mm-hmm. So like, what if it's not on the other side? You know, like I'm sure there was just such a mess.
You're gonna want it everywhere.
You'd have to put it in both. I guess.
I guess they just. I don't know if that was maybe forced in the Okanagan into all contracts at that time. I don't know.
They're in a lot of the Okanagan contracts. I don't think they're mandatory, though.
No, I don't think so.
No, but I think a lot of them do, because there are more natural events. Right? Yeah. So.
But prior to that, I had rarely ever, if ever, seen it.
Yeah. Yeah. I hadn't.
So, it's not a big
it's
problem.
It's only been big the last like 4 or 5 years, probably, right?
Yeah.
What's happening with this world?
We're all just a little bit more prepared.
Yeah.
So basically, the notes of the night is, if you're qualifying for a mortgage, be upfront and honest with your broker. There is nothing, and I mean nothing, they haven't heard before. I'm sure you've heard it all.
I have.
Yeah. They will keep your information confidential. And agents, if you're working with clients, always use a broker and make sure they are pre-approved and ready to go. Help them understand that no, they're not going to complete if they've got insurance, if they quit their job prematurely, or if they couldn't qualify. Did I say that right? If they couldn't qualify?
Yeah.
Are we still recording?
Oh, it's not perfect. We don't do perfection here.
Close too.
And of course, don't buy that furniture, don't buy that truck, don't buy that car, and screw your credit prior. Just make sure you keep open lines of communication regarding all aspects of your purchases between now and then. So that's all the tea spilling today, folks. Thank you so much for coming out. I appreciate it.
Thank
you.
Cheers.
Lots of tea spilt.
Thank you for listening to Spilling the Tea, a real estate podcast with Kristy Macero and Shelagh Maycheck.